All right, so at this point we are done with the graphic design portion of the class, and we're going to be switching over to AutoCAD. And part of the thing that I wanted to really kind of reinforce with you guys was using lines to create things in Illustrator. When we switch over to AutoCAD, we're going to be doing basically everything in lines. So I hope that that kind of reinforced a little bit of something in you guys and got you sort of prepared for this. Um, so let's go ahead and just jump in here. Um, I have AutoCAD here and running. We're going to go ahead and hit new, and we'll start a new file here. And it's going to load in. So our movement here to get around, we have a couple options. So we've got the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. This is going to be relative to the position I'm at, so I can actually move myself across and around and away from things where I can kind of actually get away from the center just by zooming. So remember that you can move out excuse me, move in and out relative to the mouse position, and then use that to actually zoom around on the page. The other option we have is to hold down the middle mouse button and actually drag it, and this will give us the ability to pan normally like you'd expect. Another option that we have, and I might as well get into this now while we're at the beginning, is keyboard commands. I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of them in this program. Um, Most of how I learned AutoCAD was through keyboard commands. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to do those. There are some times where I don't remember where the button is because it was a thing that they didn't add the button till later. Or at least it was hidden in a menu before. So let's go over keyboard commands. Right now you see I have nothing on the mouse, and there's this bar right here that says type a command. You don't actually have to type in there. I can just start typing out here. And you can see that I have this little bar here next to my cursor. If you don't have this, hit the F12 key on your keyboard, or you can type, what is it, Dyn mode right there. And if yours doesn't say 3, and you can also check down here, these two bars are the same, excuse me, information generally. The nice thing about this one on the bottom is it'll actually have color highlights, and we'll go over what some of those are later. But if yours is not set to 3 right now, then you'll want to set it to 3 so that you have the same visibility that I have here. So, one other thing I wanted to show you guys in order to get around is occasionally you'll find yourself where you're zoomed super far out, or maybe something happened and you accidentally shot yourself way far over. So what you can do is type Z, which will bring up the zoom menu when you hit enter. And then right here we have all the options that you can go from there. So see how some of these have certain letters that are highlighted in blue? So if I want to do zoom extents, which would allow me to rezoom my project around everything I've worked on at this point, I could hit E and enter. So in fast fashion, that's just Z enter, E enter, and that would get me to that point. It's really helpful, and occasionally another thing that'll happen is you'll load into the program and you will be stuck in a certain zoom level. You can't zoom very far out. Zoom extents will actually reset that boundary, and it's a really quick way to do it. There's another way to do it that I tried once, and it's a mess. Zoom extents will automatically reset that. So that's a helpful way of reconfiguring that if you do get stuck. The other thing we need to worry about, and if I click out here, you can see that we're working, it's giving me different numbers. So it's using a coordinate system, so X, Y, and then it's showing me these X, Y values that I have here. Those are incorrect for what we're going to be doing because we need to be using architectural scales. So I'm going to switch it around. And so the first thing you should do every single time you start a new AutoCAD file is type units. All right, it's going to bring up this menu, and you can actually find this menu. Let's see, it's under drawing utilities and units right here. So it's the same menu. There's all these menus exist, and you can even see when I actually, if you watch down here, another thing to note real quick too is I'm hitting escape, which is canceling a lot of these commands. So when I go up here and I actually load the units panel, you can see that it effectively types units for me down here. So if you ever go, oh, that was a nice panel, I wonder if there's a shortcut to get to it, there absolutely is. Check the bar down here, and that'll be a way for you to figure that out. Um, all right, so the first thing you should change every single time that you get into one of these is to actually change this to architectural. So right now we're in decimal, and you can see that these are some of our outputs we'd be using. When we change this to architectural, it changes it to feet and inches. So these are the values we're going to want to be working with. Another thing to use is the scale of content right here. So if I was currently it's set to inches, if I enter a number, so let me hit OK, and we'll go over this. So I'm going to hit L, which is going to start drawing a line. And if I click somewhere and then move it out in a direction, we'll go over this in a little bit more detail in a second. If I do 2, enter, it's going to draw that 2 inches. If I want it to actually draw in feet, I'll have to do 2 feet and hit the apostrophe key there, and then it will draw out 2 feet. If I want to draw it in feet and inches, just out of preference, I usually do 2 feet, and then put the inches on it, and it'll draw it out to there correctly. But I don't think you have to do it every time. So if I just do 2, 4 without the inches, you can get that. So you don't have to put inches down because of that setting. All right. The other thing I want to talk about is back in the units menu. We have this right here, the direction. So the angle that we were talking about, I'm going to go over this in a second as well, but I want you just to know where this is coming from since we're just in this window. So when I enter an angle of 0 degrees, that's going to be east. It's going to be going off to the right. North is up 90 degrees, west is south, or sorry, west is 180, south is 270. So it's going to go, currently because of these settings, counterclockwise, east all the way around. You can change this. You can choose like, oh, maybe I want north to be, my default, and I want it to go clockwise. What I can tell you from experience is if you work in an office and you do a bunch of weird customizations to your interface, anytime you have a problem and you ask a coworker for help, they will tell you absolutely not. I will walk you through it, but your keyboard commands and stuff are all kinds of wonky. So I would not mess with some of these settings too much unless there's a very, very good reason for you to. Another thing is the precision right here. So right now it's 1/16 of an inch. Eventually, when we're working on floor plan scale things, a 1/16 of an inch isn't anything that we care about. But eventually when we get into documenting things later in the semester, we will have times where, say, a font size might be 3/32 of an inch. So it's going to round that to to a different number. I'd say 2/16, but it'll probably round it to an eighth or something, for example. Keep that in mind. When you enter a number that is below that precision, it will get rounded to a different value. So, for example, when I'm drawing out here, see how it's going up only in 1/16 of an inch, so 7/16, half inch, or 8/16. So it's only recognizing those fixed values, but I can go in between the values. So I can start and I can go just shy of that, and it's still going to draw it to that point. It's just that the number it's going to round it to visually for our use is sort of irrelevant to how it's going to put that number down when it's showing it. So just keep that in mind, that there is a place to change those settings, but I wouldn't mess with them too much. Okay, so let's get into some of the tools that we have here. I was just using the line tool there for a couple examples. So let me walk you through some of the things you can do with the line tool. So again, you can click on the line tool here. I like hitting L, and to draw it, I can just click and then click. And right now it's going to continue letting me click, so I can just keep clicking around. When I'm using tools, there's an option that the spacebar becomes a thing that you can use to redo actions. So if I start drawing this line, I can hit spacebar to end it, and then spacebar to start drawing again. Oops, and that just snapped to that. So it is kind of handy in a way where there are a couple times where I do find that, I want to start drawing. Excuse me. I want to start drawing something, and then instead of hitting escape and then moving my hand to the other side of the keyboard to type L, I can just start drawing with the space bar, space, start drawing, or space again once I'm at the next spot. So it's a double space. So it's just one of those little optimizations that helps you cycle through things. Let's also, really quick before I go on to the other stuff, talk about selection. So right now I have a whole bunch of stuff here, and I kind of covered this in Illustrator, but very quickly for a couple of you. And that there are two different selection methods with AutoCAD. And we'll actually see this in other programs as well as we move further. And that is the difference between a left and right select. So right now I did this selection. You can see as I go different directions, this color changes. This blue one will only select things that it fully circles. So if I do a selection like that, I only get these ones up here. All right, so I'm doing a left to right, and it only gets the things it fully circles. If I do right to left, it's going to grab everything it touches. So that's one way where if you're working inside of, say, a weird space, a long rectangle, and you just want to get the stuff that's in there, you can do a right to left select like that and grab all the stuff inside of that space. Instead of going one at a time and going, oh, I'll get that and that. It's very easy for you to use these in different ways and actually speed yourself up while you're working. So I'm going to hit escape just to deselect those, and then I'll do a left to right and we'll clear everything out. Another important feature of the line tool, and a lot of these other tools are going to have these as well, is being able to type. And so what I mean by that is I'm going to hit L enter. So I'm going to bring up the line tool. I'm going to start, and then you can see that I've got these different directions that I'm going in. You may not have some of these turned on. Go ahead and turn them on is to match these settings that I have down here, and we'll go over those next, just to kind of cover them. But so I can move this off in a direction, and then I can type a value. So say I want this to go 3 inches, 3 enter. And then if I wanted to go up 6 inches, snap it in that direction, 6. If I want it to go in whatever this angle is specifically, I can do 7 in that direction, for example, and just keep going. Now another option that you have is being able to actually just type directly. So if I do L enter, first point, I can do 0, 0, which will start it at the origin of the drawing. So again, this is a coordinate system, just like in math class. This is negative, negative, this is positive, positive, this is positive, negative, and this is negative, positive. So I can tell it to start at a specific point if I want to. Generally, I don't do that. It's kind of weird. The other thing that I can do is I can specify an angle. So right now I can do angle. Oh, sorry. 0, 0. And then next point, I can do angle 30 degrees. And so then that will give me, it's locked to the 30-degree slope right here. And then I can enter another value for, how long were these? Let's say 2 feet. So I can lock it in that angle and tell it go 2 feet in this direction. If I want it to go 270 degrees, which is, again, remember, down, I'm going to do shift, comma again, which is the that little angle symbol. I'm going to do 270, and then I'll type 1 foot. Oh, I typed 2 feet. And that'll let me do that. So there are times where you'll end up running into a situation where you're working, the outside perimeter, for example, of the building. You know that there's one section that's 10 feet long going this way. And let's do Z enter, E enter to actually zoom out and be able to see this. So this is now 10 feet. And then I know from my documentation that I'm copying, I know that this comes up at a, say, 22-degree angle. So I'll do angle 22, and it's going to be 5 feet. If I didn't know that, I'd have to do some kind of weird math to go, okay, well, I know based on some other documentation that like this point is out here at a certain distance, you know, and then it's also over here, it goes up a certain distance, so now I can draw this line back here and then delete these and I have the right line. So that's what I'm trying to avoid with that, is that situation. So I just want to make sure you guys know that you can do that. You can also do specific points. Again, you're generally not going to be doing manual entry like this, but I want to make sure you know you can. So I can go 0, 0, enter, and then 10 feet, comma, 10 feet, and that will draw that up at the 10-foot point right there. All right. So there are different ways that you can draw. Most commonly, though, you will basically be walking around your model in a way where you, at least the way that I generally do it myself, is I move it off in the direction it's supposed to go, let it snap using those snap tools, type a distance, hit enter, move it again, type it and hit enter. When I use this daily, I used to be good enough that I could actually do the coordinate entry or the angle entry very quickly, but I'm not that good at it anymore. It's one of those skills you sort of have to keep up with. All right. So with that in mind, let's talk about some of these tools down here, and then we'll get on to the rest of these. So this one right here is going to be the polar tracking. This is the one, and if you actually right click on it here, you can get different settings. So right now it's set to only snap to 90 degrees. So when I was drawing my lines, you can see it snapped to 90, 90, 90. If I want to, say I'm working on a project and I know I've got a lot of 30-degree angles, I can come in here, set it to 30, and now it's going to snap to every 30-degree angle that I've got in that project. All right. That can speed you up, but if you're working on a project that, you know, is just 90-degree or 45-degree angles, you'll actually just, well, especially if it's got 45, because you're not going to have a 45 in that setup. So keep in mind you can change these around. You can go down to the 15-degree one, and now you're just snapping it kind of at everything, which will get you in trouble if you're too close here. Especially what happens in the studio computers is your mouse cables are kind of bunched up. So you'll get the mouse in some position like right there, you'll let go, and then the mouse will move a little bit, and you'll enter a number, look up at the computer, and your line's shot off somewhere. So I would say generally when you're working with some of these assistance tools that it's providing, choose the right set of snap tools here, and then overdraw. So like if I'm only going 10 feet out, this is about 10 feet compared to that, right? If I'm only going 10 feet out, I'm going to move the mouse over to here. Let me actually move it so it's centered. I'm going to move the mouse out here. So even if it moves, what do we set it to? Oh yeah, okay. So even if it moves a little bit, it shouldn't snap too far off or jump to a completely different coordinate, but it looks like it's not too bad. But that's more of a habit, I guess, from SketchUp, which we'll be covering later, and it happens there more. You can turn this off just by clicking on it, and now I have none of that highlighting, okay? Now you guys, in previous classes, I've gotten a lot of confusion with students accidentally turning this one on, which is the ortho, and this is just going to snap it entirely to 90 degrees. So again, if you know that you're going to be only working in 90-degree snaps, you can turn ortho on, but especially if you're going to end up having 45-degree angles or other stuff, you'll want to turn this off. So don't forget that you can turn these on and off as you need. For some of you, you might not have a grid in the background as well, so I'll cover this. So there's the grid right here, turns that on and off. I like to have it. It's not necessary though. And especially when we get out to here and you end up working inside actually setting stuff up for print, you'll have to double click inside of these windows, turn that off, and then double click out. Just it helps reading it when you're going to print. So let's go back here. If you just in case you did get stuck in here, something that I guarantee will happen to every single one of you at some point in the semester is you'll be working here in what's called paper space. This right here is model space. This is where you set up your drawings. This is paper space. So this is a window, a viewport into model space that you'll actually use to set up your floor plans for print. And what will happen to every single one of you is the only way you can get out of this is you can the only way initially that I've told you so far to get out of this is double click out here. So you can see when I double click there, it turns bold. Double click out here, it goes not bold. What will happen to every single one of you at some point this semester is you will zoom in on it, you'll double click, you'll do what you need to do, and then you go, oh no, I'm stuck and I can't get out because you can't zoom the page. You're stuck in the viewport zooming the page. So the way to get out of here is to type P space, which is short for paper space, hit enter, and it gets you out of there and you can zoom out again. So don't forget that one. I guarantee like every single one of you will have that happen to them at some point this semester. All right, so the next tool over here is going to be Object Snap. This one is very useful. So right here you can see I've got a bunch of different checkboxes here. When we're working with stuff, it helps being able to snap to different points on the lines that we're referencing. In particular, endpoint and midpoint are very helpful. Center is as well. Intersection is very helpful. And so what that means is if I'm drawing a line, so I just turned my midpoint on. So now I can snap to that, or I can snap to these endpoints. It's super helpful being able to snap to midpoints like that, especially because a lot of times it might be, oh, well, you're drawing a wall and then you need to get the midpoint for some reason. Maybe you've got, you know that there's a wall exactly in the middle, and then you'll draw this here and offset as you need to. So these snap tools are very helpful for being able to do some of that. I would highly recommend having the intersection as well, because there's a whole bunch of times where maybe okay, this comes out this far and this other thing is heading in this direction. That gives you an intersection that you can now reference. So there'll be a couple techniques I'll be showing you guys later in another lecture that actually rely on some of this. And we'll cover circles again in a minute too, but it also gives us the ability to find the center of the circle here and point to that directly as well. The next one here is going to be the object snap. So see how it's not actually snapping to that? You kind of just have to have this on. And it gives you, and I don't know why these are different buttons. Because I'm really not, yeah, I don't know. Oh wait, actually I got them backwards. This is the green highlighting line. No? I've always just had them both on. Let's see, I think it's that one right there. Yeah, see how if I move down, it's not giving me that. So I got them backwards. This is your object snap tracking. So if I hover over this, I can move it down and reference this point, or even I could go to the midpoint here and then reference down. So sorry, I got that one backwards. I don't know why. Those are weird. Okay. So again, this is your object snap. You can turn these on and off here, and then this is the reference to that. So then, there will be, again, just like all the other tools, there'll be times where I'm like, okay, you can use this as a reference. Maybe you have a hallway that you're working with, and you want to have doors directly opposite each other, so you can snap this across here. Or maybe there's something that comes across here, and I need something to match it that comes down over here. Well, then I can reference that and then get rid of the points as I need to. So there's different things you can do with those settings. If you're visually not seeing some of these green lines, that's basically what those are. Check your settings down here. We'll get into annotative objects later in the semester. That's kind of its own hour-and-a-half lecture, so look forward to that. All right. So that covers, we've done movement, we've done the polyline, we've done units, we've done some of these settings, and then we've done basic entry. So let's get into some other tools here. So there's the polyline is the next one that we've got. You can click on it or you can type P-line. I think you can even get away with PL. And what the polyline is if I'm doing this with the polyline, it's visually this is no different than me doing something similar with the line tool. The difference is that when I select this, it's the whole thing. So if I select this segment, see how it only selects that segment of that set? This is all grouped together. All right. So a polyline is just a fancy line. There are some advantages and disadvantages to using both. The main thing I will tell you is that if you have a polyline, you can type explode and it will break this polyline into individual lines. So now there's not really any difference between these two. And if I type, I believe it's join, yeah, then it will basically turn this set of lines into a polyline. So there's times where you want to switch those back and forth. Maybe you want to draw out some part of something with polylines because there are advantages to doing that. And then come back afterward. I guess an example is, and we'll be using this very shortly when or for your milestone this week, is, if I was to draw, say, a 10 by 10 cube, 10 foot, 10 foot, and then I can snap object reference here. And then another option I have is CL, which will close. It'll send the point to the initial point here. So now I have these 4 lines right here, and I can run an offset command, 6 inches, and offset that. If this was a 10 by 10 set of lines, then when I try to run the offset command here, distance 6 inches, I have to do each of these individually. And not only do I have to do them individually, it leaves these little extra bits over here that I now have to come by and run a trim command to clean up. So it's actually faster for me if I was to do this, to draw these lines as I need, join them, and then do my offset, than it would be to draw them individually, offset them individually, and then do cleanup afterwards. So you can think about that as you're drawing stuff, that there are good times to have a polyline, and then there are other times where there's not. So that's why I think they're pretty much interchangeable, and you can kind of leverage that to speed yourself up. Circle's the next big tool here. There are a whole bunch of ways that you can use this tool. You can see right here in the menu down below that there are 2 different options that we have. So we have the 3-point and the 2-point. I'm going to just go ahead and go with the default one right now, which is the 2-point, I believe. And it's basically going to go, where's the center and what's the radius? If we know what the radius is, or rather if we know what the diameter is and we don't want to do the math for radius, we can hit D, enter, and it'll switch it to allow us to enter the radius of, or sorry, the diameter of the circle instead. So if I know that my diameter is 2 feet, I can switch it over and do that. Whereas if I know the radius is, or if I know the diameter is 2 feet, then I can just leave it on radius and do 1 feet or 1 foot, and that gives me the same value. The other option that we have for circle, and again, you can hit CI. There we go. If we enter this as 3P, then we would do first point, second point, and then we would do a third point on the circle, which would let us kind of set a third kind of off-axis diameter here. I generally never do this though. You're pretty much either going to know what the radius or diameter of the circle is, so I wouldn't bother with doing it. If you need to do ellipses, there's the ellipse tool here, and I believe that's EL. L? Yeah, okay. And this lets you do first and second points like that. So it's just a center, what's your first axis, what's your second axis, and that's how you draw ellipses. I don't think there's. I guess you could do a 3-point, so you would do that, but I don't know because it does the weird side. Yeah. So circle is just a circle. Ellipse is a wonky circle. Just go with that. Arcs are another thing that there's a whole bunch of settings in here. We'll go over them, I guess, a bit more in detail, but it really depends on what you're doing and what references you have. So I might as well just show you guys. So if I have section of wall here, and we've got, let's just snap to the midpoint here, and let's say we have a 2'4" door, and I want to put a door across here. So I need to put the door in here, and let's say that this is my 2'4". We'll leave that for now. Let's just keep it simple. And I need to put the door swing on here. So I have a center that point right here, and I have a start and an end. So if I was to use the arc tool, which of these would I use, and how would I assign it? So in this case, there's the start, center, and end. So I could go start, center, and end, and then you can see right now it's going the counterclockwise way that was specified by default. If I hold down control, it'll switch it over so that I can choose that specific angle. So you can, depending on what available information you have, for example, maybe I don't know that that's there. Maybe I do just have my start and my center, and I don't know what the point is that's up here. Well, now I can draw this because I can just snap it to that angle. Whereas if I know start, center, and angle, it's gonna be a bit more of a pain to do this because now I have to go 90 degrees. This one feels a little bit, I don't know, I don't like how that one feels. If you know, for example, I couldn't do it with start and angle. So I've got my start here. I don't know what my end is, so I can't set that angle necessarily, because this, now if I come back and draw this up 2'4", I didn't have the right point there. So which arc tool you use is going to depend on what points you have access to or which ones are available. Alternatively, I could have actually just come in here and done start, center, and end, and that would have probably been more natural too. Okay. We've got the rectangle tool here. The rectangle tool is just a polyline with less steps, assuming that you know the dimensions. So if I've got that, again, you see really no difference between them, and they both explode just fine down into the base elements. So often when I talk to you guys in class, I'm going to say it a whole bunch of times, you're just putting lines down. Everything in here is just a line. You have a start and end and a midpoint. Everything you're working with in AutoCAD is just a line. So if you need to cut something in half, well, we'll cover that in a second. But don't worry too much about what's going on in here, all right? Everything you're dealing with is lines. Even this is just an arc. It's just a line with the center point here for the angle, right? All right. So you do have a couple settings. You do have polygons. Every once in a while, there will be like a hexagon or something you need to do. So this is one of those good times where I can show you guys what some of these are. So like, line tool, you don't have anything down here. Hexagon tool, when you start it, asks for how many sides. You can just hit enter or spacebar and then specify where it starts. This tool actually gives you couple options. You have inscribed in circle and circumscribed in circle, and I can kind of show you guys what those are just by doing two different things. So this is the inscribed, and if I move this up and do 1 foot, it's going to draw it there. If I do this and then switch it to circumscribed and do 1 foot, it's going to be that big. And so what that difference is when I reference this is that the 1 foot is referring to either this center to that corner is 1 foot, or the center to this is 1 foot. So that's the difference between inscribed and circumscribed. Um, I never get them right the first time. I guarantee if you have me do this in class, I will get it wrong the first time. So when you are, if someone says, "Oh, we're going to put 2 foot hexagons," or maybe you have a 8-sided table in something in a group project. Work with your partner to make sure that which of these two differences are they talking about, because they could be talking about this one right here or this one right here. What it effectively means is that if I draw a circle here, oops, these values for the circumscribed, this is a 1 foot circumscription. This is a 1 foot inscription. Somehow people can remember this. I can't. It's just not how my brain works. But you can see that this is effectively the same size circle between these. If I grab this and we move it over here, same size circle, but it gives you 2 different polygons for that hexagon. All right. So keep that in mind. The other thing that we have, and we'll be going over this, or the next thing we have that we'll be going over a lot more, is going to be this hatch tool right here. And that's a really easy one to do with your left hand. Generally, what we're going to be doing early on is we're going to be doing solid fills. So you can choose solid here, pick point, and then come out here and start clicking. And it's going to fill these in like that. Oops. It is a picky tool, and I don't mean just in that you're picking points. When you're using the hatch tool, you might have drawn something where you have the tiniest gap in the entire world. Sometimes it will figure out that you didn't mean to do that. So for example, if I only wanted one of these set up in a way where, let me get in here real close. So maybe maybe I meant for these to connect right here. And I only wanted to hatch in part of this. See how that just kind of went, you know what? It looks like he wasn't, that line's very close. It looks like he wasn't trying to get that to do that. But there are other times where, maybe this is just slightly larger of a gap. And now if I run the hatch tool, it might fill in the entire thing. So there are times where this tool will work differently, and I guarantee it's because you have just like the tiniest weird gap somewhere. What is this right now? See, it's rounding it to a 16th, but that's a 1/8 right there. So yeah, it's a tiny gap, but it's going to change how this draws. So you guys will have issues with it, or you guys will very likely have issues with it at some point. Similarly, what's going to happen is you go to fill in, say, the walls of your project, and you run the hatch, and that was too small. You go to hatch it, and it gives you this error. A boundary cannot be determined. It's going to give you these little red highlights right here. They're pretty easy to see, and it's basically telling you, hey, you wanted me to fill this in, but because of this little gap right here, I would end up filling up infinity around it because this isn't enclosed. So you guys will run up against that too. Just look for the red circles and go, oh, this isn't filled. Click and drag that up. And then when you run your hatch tool again, really? What do we do here? That is closed. There we go. Yeah. I don't know why that threw that error a second time. Most of the rest of these tools exist, but we generally don't use them. Splines and Bezier curves aren't really super useful for architecture, especially because we can't determine, exactly where that point is. They have a couple uses, I'm sure, but this is generally not one of them. So most of these other tools we won't end up using. Um, yeah, so those are some of those. All right, let's talk about this next set over here, the modify column. So we've got a couple easy ones here. Move. So not super often you'll end up moving stuff. Um, let's see. It's just yeah. M. We'll bring up the same move menu as well. And here's a trick that I like showing you guys because it's super helpful. Um, Often you'll end up in a space where you've got a whole bunch of stuff and you try to move something. So let's say I've got this right here, and then um, kind of hard to find a good explanation for it right now, but like let's say you're trying to move it and it has to go here, but the thing you're working with keeps snapping to something else. Or if I'm moving this up, I move this up and then it keeps snapping to something else. So what I want you guys to know when you use the move tool is find a clear space to reference. All right, you don't when you have the thing selected, you don't have to click on it to move it. So what I'll do is I'll find a clear space outside of the rest of my model, and I'll use this as a reference for how far and which direction it needs to go so that I don't end up snapping to other stuff in my model, right? So I can move this and I can do that and there's no issue because it's not mixed up in all the other stuff. Let's see, are there any alternative things? If you don't have anything selected, you can select the objects after starting the tool, hit enter, spacebar, and then you can specify, whatever your movement might be. So you don't have to select stuff. That being said, for all of these tools where you have to select something like the move tool, I always recommend you do your selection first. Otherwise what happens is you start the move tool, you make your selection and screw it up, and then you have to get out of it. I like having it and being able to mess around with what I have selected by holding shift and deselecting it, or holding down shift and adding, or control and adding to it. So come on. No. Oh, right. I'm still in a different brain. AutoCAD is just no button to add to selection. It's shift to deselect. That's what happens when you use 17 programs all year. Okay, so add to selection and then start the move tool. Choose a clear point of reference that won't get you into trouble. So if I was moving 45 degrees, it might snap to that here too. So even that I would consider too close. So find some clear space outside your model and use that as a reference. Let's do some of these other tools. Rotate's a big one, so let me move this up here. If I have this selected, RO is rotate. You'll specify a base point. So that's where it's going to rotate. So maybe I want to rotate this up that way. And I have a whole thing about that you'll end up using rotate a bunch on. So I'll start here. This is the corner that I'm going to rotate around. And then it specify the rotation angle. So again, remember, with the settings we're using, east is 0. This is 0 degrees. This is default right now. If I want this to rotate 90 degrees clockwise, I can do either 270 or I can type -90. So you can also, again, just like all the other tools, you can type the value that you want. And you can also use negative values. So if I was to do rotate and do -90 here, it's going to rotate it again 90 degrees clockwise or -90 degrees counterclockwise. Copy is another fun tool. So if I have this selected, CO is going to bring up the copy menu. We can specify a base point, and then we can say 1 foot. Another option that we have is CO, and we can choose O for mode. So let's say I need a whole bunch of these lines spaced evenly. So I'll do copy, O for mode, M for multiple. Specify the base point. So right here, we'll go off this direction 1 foot. 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet. So it's a way that you can set this up to do a whole bunch of copies all at once. Um, there are times when, again, this is useful as well. Again, there's, maybe that I've got something I'm doing where each of these is something that has to be documented, or it's just a reference point that I'll end up deleting later. So remember, you can do multiple copies with the copy tool. Let's go back to the copy tool again. We'll do that, and then at this point, I can select array, number of items to array, 10. So that'll draw 10 off in the direction that I'm working here. So you can see right there, there's 10. Usually you'll end up doing this more for like some of the other classes. You'll end up using this more for a lot of the older students were big into having wall murals that had multiplications of things. So that's one way where you, instead of doing a whole bunch of lines manually, you could do them really quickly with that tool. So for example, if I wanted a grid of 1 foot squares of 10 by 10, I could do 2 lines like this, get my 10 foot, and then we could do copy, move it out, array, 10 items at 1 foot. And then we'd need one more for the end here. Yeah. And then again, grab this one, CO, array, 10, 1 foot. Can I count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so I just have to redraw the ones at the end. And there we go. So instead of having to draw 10 individual squares, again, just let the computer do the hard work here. Okay. Oh, good. I still have the door down there. Let's do mirror before I go and delete this door. So later in the semester, I'll have you guys building your own doors. And not all doors are the same. If I want this one to flip, so let's say this one should be opening a different direction, right? So the mirror tool is one of those handy ones where you can just flip the direction. Again, MI is going to be the tool for that. And then because I don't have anything here I can reference, I just have to do this one manually. So if I need to flip this door around, I'd select the door. I could go to the back of the door right here, go straight up, and then it asks me if I want to erase my source object. So it's Y or N, or you can click on one of these. So let's say yes, we'll erase our source objects. Now I have to move this back over here. Alternatively, if I'm going to the other side of the door, what I can do is mirror, and then I can use this midpoint right here as a reference point, come across, and that'll just mirror the door down there. Alternatively, if I was to draw a line here in the middle and run my mirror, I could use this as a reference point to flip the door in the other direction. So there's a couple different things you can do with the mirror. Again, I'm just covering that the tool exists so you guys know that it does. But it has a bunch of different little uses that you'll probably see me use subtly at various points. Scale is one of the tools that I will tell you do not use. And the reason that I tell you do not use it is a generalization, but it's important while you guys are learning. Scale is not exact. And what I mean by that is if I have a space that I'm working in and I scale something, it might look right, but it won't be exact. So maybe I scale something up and I thought I scaled it, but instead of being 9 foot, or instead of being 10 foot by 10 foot, it's 9 foot 11 3/4 inches or something. Scale introduces a lot of problems in your models, so I would not use it early on until you're more comfortable with the program and you understand that just arbitrarily scaling things can cause problems. So if I have a table and I scale it up slightly, maybe that table that I had is no longer 6 feet on one end, it's 6 foot 7 1/8 inches or whatever. While that's generally not a bad thing, it means that I could have also scaled up chairs that were attached to it. And now those chairs are 1'6" wide instead of 1'4" wide. So you get a bunch of weird little knock-on effects there. So for now, until you guys can kind of realize the dangers that you can introduce with scale, and I'm saying danger, like it's not like it's going to ruin your project, but it's just, it introduces things in a weird, and you end up with weird values and spacings off. One thing that I see is, for example, doors. Like I just did this door at 2 foot. And so then what I'll see is maybe we have a slightly larger door. So someone will take this and then they'll, what am I doing? Scale, base point, and then they'll scale their door and they'll just go like that. And then when you come in here and measure this, you find out that this isn't 2 inches larger, it's, or I guess 6 inches larger. This wasn't 6 inches larger, it's 6'11" and 16". And so when I mention those gaps that you get in between your walls, that's often how that happens. Is someone went, oh, well, I'll just scale this door up, or worse, you scale a window up, and we'll cover kind of windows later. But let's say I've got a rectangle right here that represents a window. Well, you go to scale up that rectangle so it fits a wider window, but it also makes it stick out here. So now you've got to go do a bunch of stuff. And if this was the only line, then we'd be lucky, but it's not. So there'd be a bunch of other stuff you'd have to adjust in there. So stay away from scale for now, and we'll kind of talk about that later in the semester. Fillet is a super fun tool. Let me draw another rectangle here. Actually, let's just fillet this. So FIL brings up the fillet. And then this is one of those ones where it doesn't help if you select it, but I do it every time out of habit, so you'll keep seeing me doing this. So it says select first object or undo, which we're not going to bother with, polyline, radius, trim, multiple. Right now our radius is 0, 0, so we need to set a radius to actually apply the curve. So if I do this and this, nothing changes on here. Spacebar to bring the tool up again. Let's hit R to set our radius. So I'll set it to 2 inches. And now when we select our first object and second object, you can see that it applied that little curve right there. You guys will end up doing a whole bunch of filleting later on. So like if this was a sink, I could fillet the edges of the sink. If it's a couch, I could fillet the edges of a couch. If it's a, it goes on and on and on. So there's a bunch of uses for the fillet tool. Another one is if I have been doing some work and I have something going on where I have this opening right here, radius 0. In the past, I've used this to close up weird gaps. So if you use those with a 0, that can actually kind of save you some time. Now I could hit spacebar to resume this again. Let's start our radius to 6 inches now. But we have the multiple option here. So if I hit M as well, I can jump through here, do 2 points, do 2 points. I don't think it'll let me do these two. Yeah. Oh, no, it will. There we go. Okay. So if you're doing a whole bunch of stuff, make sure you turn on this multiple setting here, because that will actually help you use this tool faster. You can just get by with doing click and click, spacebar, click and click, but it's helpful that it has that multiple option in there. The other thing you guys are going to be using a bunch of is the trim tool. I've used it several times already. I know I mentioned it, but let's cover that as well. So TR is going to bring up the trim tool. And what it does is it lets me delete things that overlaps. And this is kind of like AutoCAD's version of the transform tool, or the Pathfinder tool in Illustrator. So if I wanted to have something that goes on either side of this, I could use this to wipe that out. If I wanted it to go through this way instead, I could go there. If for whatever reason this needed to come across, you can do that. There are different cutting edges here. Or sorry, selecting the cutting edges is what you would actually modify. This tool's been expanded a lot recently, and it's a lot simpler to use because you have to use to specify what your cutting edges were. But nowadays with it, you don't even have to do that. You can literally just have all kinds of wacky stuff in here going on. And if I bring this tool in, it'll just go, oh, hey, these all overlap with that segment. Cut away, buddy. Um, so it's a lot easier to use. You don't because you don't have to specify all those things. Um, so yeah, it's kind of nice having this. This is one of those tools where once we start building floor plans, you come in and run it along the inside of a wall to get rid of a bunch of overdraw that you might have had if you did draw your walls with the line tool instead of the polyline, then didn't join them. So yeah, super helpful for that. Offset is the other one, and again, I kind of mentioned this one earlier. I do a ton of offset tools. So offset, specify the difference, in this case 6 inches, and then choose the side that you want to go to. If you want it to repeat, so it's again, it's going to keep going. So select object to offset, and then it's either inside or outside. In this case, inside. But if I choose M for multiple, I can just keep clicking and it'll keep drawing that all the way in. So if you need to do a whole bunch of something, some of these tools will be more helpful at that than others. I think that's all I'm going to cover, and we're just about at an hour now. So we will have another lecture later this week going over text tools, dimension, and some of these other things for layer properties. We've got the line styles. So we have a bit to go on this program. There's a lot to cover that will have its own lectures, but I want to make sure you guys are solid on these foundational things right here that we've gone over today. And then we'll get into some of the more like text and dimensions as for documenting. We'll get into layer properties next class as well. Plus we have all these other menus that we need. Well, some of them, not all of them. But we have a couple other menus that we'll need to get into as well. Looking forward to blocks too. So that's all for this lecture. I will see you guys in class. And then get ready for more of this next week or next class.